Vietnam, and we invest in Vietnam. The president of Vietnam comes over here, and we fought this horrible, terrible war. Millions of the Vietnamese died, and thousands of our people died. And then the war ended with us walking away, and now we're friends, and now we trade with them. They have an imperfect society, as we do, but at least we're talking to them. And this was the strong advice of the founders. But domestically as well, there was no intent to have a welfare state. And it's all done, you know, so often with good intentions, but even if you have good intentions of spreading our values overseas, it won't matter if you use force and it backfires on us. So even the good intentions of taking care of our educational and medical needs by the federal government, if you end up with poorer medical care and you only end up with more expenses, then it just doesn't work. On education, the Constitution says that the federal government's not supposed to be involved. It should be local. So what do? We create a federal bureaucracy, Department of Education, send billions of dollars over there. Bureaucrats get paid a lot of money. The teachers don't end up getting, the students don't get better education. And what do when we get the conservatives in? They double the size of the Department of Education. So we have to just reassess our values and decide what we want the role of government to be. And my argument has been that we want the role of government to be to protect our liberties and to have confidence that free people can take care of ourselves. But the transition is tough. How do you get there when we are so engulfed with so much government? If you don't do anything, we'll have a financial crisis because you can't keep printing money out of thin air. And that's what we're doing. We can't tax and we can't borrow enough, so we start printing money, and that ruins the value of the money, and the prices go up. So we have to make a decision. And my plan would be to stop spending so much money overseas. Start thinking about our responsibilities. That is taking care of ourselves here at home, because we would have less expenditures, less people dying, and more friendship. You know, how I pointed out about Vietnam, we could have more relationships like that rather than threatening everybody that disagrees with us. We could literally save hundreds of billions of dollars to change our foreign policy. Then we would have the funds to do some of the things that we probably should do now until we, you know, reach a better stage in our return to the Constitution. But you don't have to turn anybody out into the streets. You don't have to give up on taking care of our infrastructures. But you'd have enough money to save it, and cut the deficit, and still take care of those who are dependent on the government, whether it's the elderly that would like to get their Social Security money back, but quite frankly, it's all gone anyway. So we have to cut these spendings in order to take care of the people. Even on the infrastructure, truly, technically, the infrastructure should have been taken care of by local people, but the federal government's been involved for a long time. They've taken all our money on highway funds. They use it for other things. So there's a justification to work a transition, but we certainly ought to be rebuilding our infrastructure and our bridges in this country before we pursue doing it in other countries. But here today, we're asked to not have our infrastructure taken care of. We're asked to buy bonds and go over and destroy the infrastructure of other countries, and then we have to pay to rebuild it. And that's what we're in the middle of, and we're bankrupt. So this policy has to change, because if we don't change it deliberately and calmly and gradually, it's going to change, because if you look at all of history, empires, they spread themselves too thin around the world. They end up, disintegrating. The empires collapse. And it's the same thing that we're dealing with. We have too many investments overseas, and we have little concern about our own borders. We send border guards over to Iraq to train their border guards. At the same time, we ignore our own borders. And we should deal with our immigration problems. That is a responsibility that we have. But one other issue that I talk about before I'm going to stop and take some questions is that whether it's domestic spending that is excessive or foreign expenditures that is excessive, none of that can be done. Of course, first, you have to have an income tax. And my position is we don't need an income tax. We didn't have it at the beginning. We don't need it now. But the other one is a monetary issue. The Constitution is very clear. It says that only gold and silver can be legal tender. And it was meant to be that way to keep the government from growing, because they would have to collect real money from the people, and the people wouldn't be willing to pay that much taxes, and therefore government couldn't grow, and they couldn't fight wars that were unnecessary. But what happens is you can delay the payment. If you just print the money, nobody knows exactly who suffers, and not everybody suffers equally. As the money loses its value, some people, especially middle class and the poor, and those on retirement, end up with a cost of living that's going up much faster. But if you happen to be in the military-industrial complex or in the banking system or on Wall Street, you get to use that money first. And it's a tremendous benefit. So poor people transfer their wealth to rich people. And this is why it becomes so disruptive. But it also contributes to the growth of government. It's a very, very deceitful tax. The founders understood this clearly. They had runaway inflation with the continental dollar. They didn't want it to happen. They explicitly said you could not print money. You had to have gold and silver coins, and that was it. And this has led to a great deal of problems. So eventually we're going to have to deal with the monetary system and the tax system, but you can't do any of that unless the people themselves, all of us, decide what should the role of government be. And the role of government under the Constitution, and in my strong opinion, is that the role of government ought to be there to preserve our liberties and have confidence enough that free people are more capable of taking care of themselves than the government, because the government is wasteful, they don't achieve it, they spend the money, and they take away our freedoms in the process. So the problems that we have today are very serious. I believe they've all come up because we've ignored the Constitution. But we can find the answers by merely looking to the Constitution, whether it's how you have a foreign policy and strong national defense, or whether it's domestic policy. But we need to have confidence. We need confidence and hope that this can come about in a positive way. But if we think negatively and say, well, you know, it can't be worked, we might as well just have the government do the best they can until the whole thing blows up, and maybe you're worrying too much. But if you look at history, there's reason to be concerned. But in the long run, I'm very optimistic about the American people really responding to this message and to the Constitution. During this campaign, we've had literally tens of thousands of people join the campaign, especially over the internet, and a lot of young people. A lot of young people love the idea of the Constitution and limited government and personal liberty, especially when they hear the economic explanation. If you want to be better off, you want freedom. Socialism and welfare does not create wealth. Government can't create wealth. All they can do is steal it and redistribute it and undermine the system. And when young people especially hear this, they respond in a positive manner. And there are many more in the country than I ever realized that knew and understood this, but they've been absolutely frustrated because nobody offers it to them. They've sort of dropped out. They don't vote. They're not in any party. They're independent. And they're just so tired of hearing the politicians say one thing and doing the other. This campaign is all about restating the principles that have made this country great. There's no reason why we should give up on it. There's every reason to believe that if we do these very simple things, they're not that complicated, and we look to the Constitution, I really believe that we can solve most of our problems. Thank you very much.